Today we're going to talk about the evolution of the places we call streets. We're in a time of change, and it's a great opportunity for us to begin thinking about what are these places we call streets, and what do we want them to be, and are we getting everything we want from them today? So the first thing I'm going to ask everybody to do is we're going to do a quick poll, and I'm going to give you a couple selections of your own definition of what is a street. So select the definition that from your perspective best defines what a street is. I guess I have to take it too, so I will. Sarah?
We've got 3 out of 4 folks having taken it. So okay. I'm going to give them another second if that last person would like to take it.
There's no right or wrong answer.
They are lengthy, so I'm giving people extra opportunity to be able to read them because they're meaty answers.
So I will let everybody know that these meaty answers, as Sarah puts it, these are all definitions that I pulled out of a dictionary or a couple of dictionaries several years ago.
Okay,
all right.
Here's your results.
So everybody picked the first one. All right. That's very interesting. Because I would say that that's not so much how we use our streets today or how we design them today. So these are actually photos from downtown Boise some time ago. And the one, particularly the lower right one, really shows a very active street with lots of different uses, not just modes, but uses. You can see people kind of hanging around and talking, and people aren't just using it to get from one place to another. So, but this is a lot more common of our streets today and what they look like. And so I want to just ask everybody real quickly, you can unmute yourself, raise your hand, and Sarah will call on you and unmute yourself. If you can tell me what you think changed in that 2.5, 3 generations, and why we have more and more streets that look like this and fewer that look like what they used to.
I think people became uncomfortable with uncertainty. So there had to be like a ridiculous amount of order placed in streets. That's my guess.
Any other thoughts out there?
Well, we've certainly increased our reliance on motorized vehicles, and the sprawled forms of development post-World War II, I think, have contributed to this kind of reliance on the car.
So I'm the policy wonk. I'll go to the policy supposition, and that is that early on we prioritize cars over everyone else with jaywalking laws and other things, which then gave the professional agency folks who were emerging at that time in the transportation industry the permission or direction, whichever it might be, to design based on that priority. And they did. Did a really good job.
Anybody else? Any more hands raised? If not, I'll go on. Okay, well, I would just add to those, I think both of those or all of those are obviously clear reasons. I think there's many reasons, but we really quit thinking about what a successful street was. We changed what a successful street was as cars came along more and more, as society sped up, as land uses spread out, we did adapt policy to make all that work better. And we did that quite successfully. And in some instances, we're very much still doing that today. But so I'm going to scroll through just some slides here that kind of show, you know, that priority shift. And as I do it, I want people to think about in this time of the pandemic, what are you experiencing today that makes you maybe feel like we have opportunity to rethink some of this? So these are, particularly love this one because I just love that brick wall. You have a person walking along that sidewalk there, but there's really nothing friendly. You don't really want to be there. That person's walking there because maybe they're going to catch a bus on that street, or they have to go there because it's the quickest route. But the other is actually a place you might want to go. It'll also get you from a mobility perspective where you want to go. This is, you know, kind of a Main Street perspective to less of a Main Street perspective. That does have a bus stop there. Not much of a bus stop, but it does have one in the lower right. I really love this one because it shows not just our streets, but our other land uses we've changed as well. You've got this massive parking lot because everyone's arriving, or we assume everyone's arriving to that church to go to church in a car, and we have to have some place to house those cars while they're at church. And I love this background. The other church is in the middle of a town, and people can get there and still go to church. But what I particularly love is a church is a good example of a land use that's very important to us, and we value it, but it's not used all the time. And so we've committed this enormous amount of land around this church to a very limited use, probably quite expensive, frankly, for that church to maintain and operate.
Not to mention, Deanna, not to mention you wonder what was there before the parking lot.
Yeah, that would be fun to have. What did it look like before? And then I just really like these last two because I think what we really did was we changed the focus of our streets from humans to cars, even though they're for us still. But we forgot that somewhere along the way, and streets increasingly became about cars. Those policy changes Elaine talked about became about how do we have cars there? How do we help cars move around there safely and comfortably? And we quit thinking about the person. The person's inside the car and they're no longer relevant. But that's not true. We have people who are on our streets and around our streets and would like to use our streets. So here's another poll. And this is one that's a multiple choice one. So I want you to think of a favorite street and then go in and select all of the elements that for you make that a favorite street. Just kind of think of a street in your mind. And I tried to make this balanced, so it might be a street you like to drive, it might be a street you like to walk on, it might be both.
And just a reminder, this is a multiple choice, so you can pick more than one answer.
Although I would say if you pick all of them, you're not trying very hard. That's why I want you to think of a street and then imagine that street in your mind and then think about what is on that street that is on this list.
Okay, we've got, looks like one more person that should take it.
It's probably me.
Oh, take it, Deanna.
You want me to take it? Okay.
You won't skew the results, I promise.
All right. So what do we have? Well, this is really interesting because we still don't have a people emphasis, even from this group. We've got infrastructure for people, but not the people themselves. So I think that says a lot to me.
I wonder how much of that is because of our current situation.
Could be. Do I close this or do you close it, Sarah?
I will close it. Yep. There you go.
Okay, now we're going to go to the opposite. Think about a street you really don't like very much, and then think about what it has. Not surprising, everybody picked those two. So even though more and more of our streets are like this, these are the kinds of streets we tend to not really enjoy. And frankly, even for people who drive a lot and want to get places quickly, just because they are functional for them, they don't necessarily enjoy them or like them. And that's one of the things that I think this time of transition is really an opportunity to start rethinking our streets. What are they? So one of the things I want to pose, and the real purpose of this whole webinar, when I talk to people about streets, I start by talking about them as land. And I think that's the main thing we've really forgotten. We have an enormous amount of land that we've committed to this amenity. And the real question is that the best use always of that land? So things have been changing. They've actually been changing somewhat for the last 20 years or more. This is some changes that came out about 10 years ago from US DOT. So at all levels of government, we're really starting to stop and ask ourselves, what do we want from our streets? A lot of the emphasis has really started with modes and how do we accommodate all the other modes? How do we improve safety for people who want to walk and bike? And the emphasis for this has come from many, many places. The health sector and people wanting to be healthier and be able to walk and bike some. And the biggest emphasis is really safety. Sarah, are you now going to have to advance it?
Yes.
Okay. So I think the main thing on this slide I really want you to notice is the very last bullet point. It talks about how is adjacent land use best served? And that's really how we need to start thinking about our streets. It's a land use, like any other land use, and it works together and works with the other land uses. So if we start rethinking about our streets that way, it helps us ask the question, are we getting everything we need and want from it? So you can go forward. So what do we want from our streets? A lot of people don't understand that our streets are a majority of our public lands in our urban places. So not outside in the very, very rural areas, but anywhere from a small downtown to a large city. We have about 80% of our public lands are our streets. And we spend millions on our streets here in Ada County. And our streets are a larger portion of our public investment in any city, county, or state than many of our other uses. So for a city, for those of you who live in the cities that control and own and operate your own streets, think about your streets competing with your parks, your public library, your fire, your police, all of the other amenities and things that we want from our government. Your streets compete with those in the budget. So I like to talk about, are we really getting the most out of this investment? It's a huge public investment. It's a huge amenity. We want our streets. We need to be able to get around. But what more could we be getting out of our streets? Sarah? So this is really the other way to think about this. If we design our streets for cars, which is the change that began way back at that earlier slide when I asked you what you thought had changed. And this is really what changed. We began designing more and more. We designed our communities, not just our streets, but our entire communities around cars. And when you design your community around cars, you get more cars and you get big wide streets that serve cars. Go forward. So right now in this pandemic time, especially, we're realizing we need to be thinking about people. We need to be thinking about where they want to be, where they need to be, how they can be there. We need more room for people. We're really conscious of that right now where we need this social distancing. But it's beyond this current pandemic. And there are some communities around the country that are beginning to do this. They're doing something called street opening. So they're repurposing portions of their streets back to people. Some places they're closing a lane on a multiple lane road to provide more places for people to walk safely and at a distance. And this has really created an opportunity for us to stop and think, wow, you know, our streets are more than just for cars. Sarah? So this is not to say we should go back to that very early photo. We're not getting horse and buggy back. We have cars, we know we have cars, we want cars. So the real thing is, how do we create a new network? What is that network like? And how do we create this range of streets? It goes all the way back again to those land uses. So a street, the freeway that goes from town to town, probably isn't going to change a lot. Our highways, some places are highways that are connecting city to city. They don't need to change much, although we do know that there's a growing number of people who are interested in taking trips by bike. So that might be a slight change we need to think about for those streets. You know, are we encouraging that tourism in our community and in our state? And that's an economic tool and an economic engine. So if you are one of those states, Colorado's done an amazing job on building facilities on its actual state highways that encourage people to be there on a bike, make them feel safe and comfortable. And as a result, they've built a multi-million-dollar bike recreational industry. It's not all on the street. Some of it is backcountry and mountain biking, but a lot of it is what they've done for the street cyclist who wants to go out and travel and explore places by bike rather than by car. Sarah? So I like this because this just shows a whole variety of streets. So we need to be thinking about not every street's the same. How do we want to use that street? Where is it? Is it residential? Are there homes in front of it? Can kids go out and be comfortable crossing that street, maybe even playing in the street? Once upon a time, kids used to go out and use the street, which is public space, as public space. And they could safely and comfortably do that, and parents could allow them to do it. And we've lost some of that. I believe that by narrowing the purpose of our streets to a single purpose and a single use, we've lost community connection. And that's another thing I believe we're rediscovering through this time of challenge. And what the focus of this webinar series is about pivoting, taking direction from this change and thinking about where we want to pivot and what that pivot looks like. And we're really appreciating and rediscovering for many people community connection. We're missing community connection because it's challenging to have it. And I think we had already begun to lose some of it. The streets are the one place that are open to everyone, they're free. And it's also the one place I like to say you might encounter anybody. You know, we don't encounter a across all the demographics in our usual lives. We encounter the people we work with at work, and the people we go to church with at church, and the people we go to school with at school, and the people who live in our neighborhood, we encounter them. We have our social networks. But when you walk down the street, you might just encounter anybody. So these are just some fun pictures to help you rethink a street and which one of those streets you might want to have in front of your house or through your downtown, or even maybe further out in the suburbs. Sarah?
Here's that one that's in the middle.
Yeah. Where is it?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that is from somewhere in Europe.
Is that bikes only? It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful cycle track. So I like this one. It's just a good example. I took out all the places maybe I shouldn't have because I wanted this to be more generic. This is an actual street redesign somewhere in this country that, you know, you can see on the left, the street, how it used to be, and the street on the right. And what I particularly like about these photos, these two photos, besides showing how you can still accommodate the cars, you can still accommodate the parking. So the two car uses that people want here are fine. They're accommodated, they're adequate. They can still drive, they can still park. But now you have all these other new uses. I think it's a little deceptive because the one on the left's clearly not in the summer and the one on the right is. So you get the advantage of all the green lushness. So that's kind of skews it a little bit. So try and take that out of the picture. Although it is nice that it is landscaped and has tree, and the tree canopy was there in the earlier one, but now it can be enjoyed and appreciated by even more people because you've added the cycle track there. So you might think about a street in your community. Whoop, I wasn't ready to go. You might think about a street in your community that could use a redesign like this, or some other redesign. And the next one's my last slide. Didn't really build a whole full hour. This is one of my favorite photos, and I will give a shout out to Gary Toth, the Project for Public Spaces. Some of these slides came from him, and they have that organization's done an enormous amount of work about helping communities rethink streets from a perspective of public space. But I just really love this photo, which is also somewhere in Europe. But it helps us rethink, you know, this is a great street, and this might not be the way this street is every day. This might be a street that they close sometimes, or it might be a street that's been permanently closed to cars, or maybe never was open to cars, given where it is. And that should be okay. We need to start realizing our streets are places for people to connect, in addition to places for people to get around and to move from place to place. And even that element of streets is about connecting. It's about connecting us to each other, to our jobs, to shopping, to school, to the activities we want to get to. So what I'm really encouraging everyone to do today in this time of pivoting is to think about your streets in your hometown and your community, and think about, are they connecting you in all the ways you want them to connect you? And are you getting the most out of that investment? Might even be a great challenge for you to go into your city budget or go look at the ITD budget to get a sense of how many of your tax dollars are going to this huge amenity and this huge public investment that we all make every year.